Hi, my name is Anna Lee, and welcome to our podcast on DIR Floortime. We will first begin with an introduction to the DIR model, how it was developed, what it is, and what components it has. Then we will cover a specific technique in the DIR model called DIR Floortime. We will discuss the goals of Floortime, who it seeks to benefit, and its principles. We will end with comments and questions. The DIR model was developed in the 1980s by Dr. Stanley Greenspan, who was an expert on clinical work with children with a variety of developmental delays and issues. Since then, various studies have demonstrated that DIR is beneficial for children with autism. In 2011, two studies, one conducted in Thailand and the other in Canada, supported the model as significantly improving children's emotional development and reducing autism's core symptoms. So what is the DIR model? The Developmental Individual Difference Relationship-Based Model is a framework that helps clinicians, parents, and educators conduct a comprehensive assessment and develop an intervention program tailored to the unique challenges and strengths of children with autism spectrum disorders and other developmental challenges. So the objectives of the DIR model are to build healthy foundations for social, emotional, and intellectual growth, rather than to focus on skills and isolated behaviors. There are three components of the DIR model. First is D, which stands for developmental. The developmental component is the foundation to this model because it is critical that we have an understanding of where the child is developmentally. The 6 developmental milestones describe the developmental stages that every child must master in order for a healthy emotional and intellectual growth. Mastery of these milestones also allows the child to develop spontaneous and empathetic relationships with others, as well as to perform well academically. The stages, as you see on the slide, build on prior stages. The first 6 are targeted towards younger children, while stages 7, 8, and 9 are for adolescents and older children. The second component is I, individual differences. This refers to the idea that each child has a unique biological way of taking in, regulating, responding to, and understanding sensations around him or her. Connected with this idea is the belief that each child has individual issues or situations that interfere with his or her growth and learning. The last component is relationship-based. This describes the learning relationships the child has with his or her caregivers, educators, other professionals, and peers, all help the child to master the developmental milestones. This is a quote by Dr. Greenspan that supports the DIR perspective. I'll read parts of the quote. The essence of motivation is finding out what the natural interest of the child is, what they like they do. Motivation is basically a good observer seeing what the child likes and building on this natural interest to help the child learn what he needs to learn. Thus, motivation is finding out what the child naturally enjoys doing and then building on the interest and motivation. The essence of DIR, as illustrated by the quote, is to observe what interests a child has, and then to use that understanding to build further skills and to challenge the child. Now we will get into floor time. What is floor time? It's a specific technique in the framework of the DIR model in which, for 20 or more minutes at a time, a caregiver gets down on the floor to interact with the child. But it's also a general philosophy characterizing all interactions with the child in that all interactions have to incorporate the features of floor time. While floor time may occur on the floor, it can extend to include conversations and interactions in other places. So in this sense, floor time can be implemented all the time and everywhere, in the backyard, supermarket, and playground. Or it can be implemented at any time of the day, in the bathtub or right before going to bed. Who benefits from floor time? Children with developmental disorders, children with severe disorders of relating and communicating, and children with very severe language disturbances or motor difficulties. So these include children who are diagnosed with pervasive developmental disorder, autistic spectrum disorder, or multi-system developmental disorder. Also, while DIR Floortime often focuses on younger children, the practice and principles are very applicable to adolescents, young adults, and adults. What are the principles of floor time? First, emotion is critical to the growth of the mind and brain. The first step in floor time is observing the child closely so that you can tune into his emotional world. What is of interest to your child? What gives him pleasure? What is enjoyable to your child? Whatever it is, your child's interest is your clue to what he is feeling. Once you have figured out what he is interested in, you can use that to push him further up the developmental ladder. Because emotions are critical for growth, parents and other family members have a significant role because of their key emotional relationships with the child. The next three principles: follow the child's lead, pull the child into the shared world, create systematic challenges to help child master stages of development, are all interconnected. They demonstrate the process by which floor time helps the child master stages of development. You might be wondering why we follow the child's lead and natural interests, since it is our job to try to teach the child, and the child shouldn't be just allowed to do what he wants to do. So why do we follow the child's lead? Because through the child's interests and natural desires, we are able to see what is enjoyable to the child. So we follow the child's lead and join his world. For example, if the child enjoys wandering around the room and jumping, we wander and jump with the child. The child is then able to experience a shared world. But because we have a bigger goal for the child, let's say we are helping him in the first stage of development, which is shared attention and regulation. We don't just continue jumping around with him. We pull him into the shared world to help him master the milestones by creating challenges for him and using certain strategies. Let's continue the example of the child who needs help mastering the first stage of shared attention. If the child is wandering around, we might come up with a game in which we put our arms around him without touching him or keep getting in his way. This way, the child will learn to look at us, to move around or away from us. Thus, we are helping him with the first stage of development, shared attention and regulation. So, summary of DIR and if you have any comments or questions, please send them in. Thank you for listening.